Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Episode number 63, December 29th, 2020. I have with me our special guest, Sridhar Chityalaji. Namaskar Sridharji and a warm welcome to you, sir.
Namaskar and good morning to you all.
Sridharji, yesterday the details of the signed stimulus bill have now started coming out. That it is indeed true that every American is going to get $2,000 per head, plus the dependents. I don't know the numbers for that. Could you please shed a little bit more light on how the money was found to go from $600 to $2,000, and what does that impact in general?
Well, I think that President Trump and the House seems to have come to some sort of an alignment. To recap on the budget, the principal area of contention was around two things. The first point of contention was around the $600. The second point of contention was around the pork and belly offers that was all jumbled up close to the numbers that we balanced and reported $55 billion. The House voted as a separate, as an amendment to the bill that was sent to the president, increasing the allowance from $600 to $2,000. So the House, two-thirds majority, by two-thirds majority, including some Democrats Republicans voted. Now it's gone to the Senate. We will know in the Senate today what happens. Let's assume that the Senate rejects it, and President is going to use the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, and he said that he will take it to $2,000. So this is one part of the ledger. The second part of the ledger is pork and belly. What is he going to cut, and what's going to be the incrementality of this $2,000? We don't know about the pork and belly. Certainly that was not a resolution that was reflected, but they all agreed that they would do that, right? So therefore, that reconciling part of it would come. I think the other thing is that we need to be cognizant whether there is any change to the dependent allowance and whether there's any change to the unemployment allowance. We need to recognize and see what happens to that. Both Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul have been talking about the need for. Rand Paul is not very supportive of this type of stimulus directly into the hands. He calls it as socialism. But the president made a very interesting point that the small businesses also require more support as part of his tweet and briefing. Small businesses are the beachhead of our economy, and they are impacted. They're coming back to work, so we need to kind of support them. Whether there would be his words were more is coming, if you see the press release. So whether he's going to add anything to support the small businesses as an augmentative to what is already in the plan as part of the PPP program, we will come to know of it. So in a summary, I think the stimulus has moved in the right direction from the perspective of public sentiments as well as the political sentiments between the president and Democrats. Republicans are frugal, and they're cognizant that presidents come, president goes. Some of these guys are sitting forever in the Senate, for generations and years. And their concern is what is going to be the burden on the budget. Remember, today the average interest rate the cost is 1.2%, 1.2% of the GDP, and it's manageable within the overall. If this, even around $21-22 trillion at roughly around 3.2%, it was close to about $695 to $700 billion as an expense. Today it's 1.2%. So even at, let's say, 28 trillion, we added the number to be 27, it's less than $400 billion. So there is a 200 delta derived from the benefit. So this is going to be the issue with the Senate in terms, if we're going to put so much money on the interest costs, and we have, in 1 year, we have added $5 trillion of debt, what's going to happen? So I think this is the opposite side of the argument, which is fair.
The one overarching question that remains is that this is something that is a man-induced thing, and where nobody is now talking about who was the cause of this problem and what kind of a compensatory scheme that has to be put in place so that something like this does not happen again. Is the world itself doesn't seem to have come together to try and find out the cause of this whole pandemic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the pandemics happen in, maybe once 150 years. Last was
The Spanish fly, yeah.
yes, right? So I think there is no answer. This is the fundamental difference between the concept of budgeting, which is namely whether you go with government taking more debt or and trying to manage everything from the government side or everything to be managed from the public enterprises side. There is a history where when we had a big debt crisis in United States, JP Morgan, John Pierpont Morgan with a bunch of people came together and solved the problem by assembling, this whole concept called as the government debt type of programs. And, the enterprises, the people bought the debt and helped the government to overcome. So the question here, therefore, is in these types of situations, are you going to draw down? Now, it seems like on the political, doesn't matter whether it's Republican or Democrat, those who are sitting on what I call, not on the extremities, which is left or too much to the right, somewhere to the center right, or a little bit to the center left. These people seem to believe that it's like a balance sheet. I think I had mentioned this in the program before, which is, generally on the Republican side, you have a Treasury Secretary who is from the banking side of the business. Not because, I have a special favor for, coming from that side, but we look at the balance sheet, which is to say, what's our assets, what's our liabilities, what's our income, what's our, how are we going to kind of manage the expenses? If we take a look at the income and expense side of the United States, it's not a moving feast in the sense that you're not going to add new sources of income. It's fixed. You can manage the expenses side by saying that, okay, you can cut certain areas, but the mandatory spend is significant part of the overall budget. So the question, therefore, that comes up is how do you tweak the balance sheet? So then Steve Mnuchin is saying, if I go back and say, okay, I rebalance, can I absorb this debt in the balance sheet of the government? If by doing so, am I reducing the cost of the debt on the expense side? So, in his view, as we saw, that you can actually rebalance and look at the 10-year bonds, and 10-year bonds are the ones which they use a combination of 10-year and 30-year. 10-year today is around, when he rebalanced it, it was 0.7%. If it was at 1.2%, would he have done it? We don't know, right? But the story at 0.7, he rebalanced the budget. So therefore, I think it becomes an exercise, which is effectively to state that I can balance the budget, I can cut my deficit by reducing the expense side, by rebalancing the cost that I pay on the interest. Can I kind of do it domestic or can I do it internationally? Historically, being a net importer, United States has always used, the overseas people to say, you have to buy my debt, X percentage of the debt, if you want to be exporting to United States. So therefore, you had the major exporters like China and Japan and Saudi Arabia, etc., were buying about. But today, there's also a lot of domestic consumption of this specific debt. And they don't want, Japan will always be one of the debt holders. India is slowly building up, nowhere near China. And China is deleveraging the US debt. So the point, therefore, is this is why I say that they look at this as an overarching balance sheet. And when you look at the balance sheet, you can only vary two things, liability and the asset side of the balance sheet in the US government, and see what you can do to manage your expenses. You don't want your expenses to be running out of control. Already, we mentioned this in the budget presentation. In the presentation, we have increased the expenses from $4.14 trillion to $6.5 trillion in this on a revenue base of 3.5 versus $3.7 trillion. So he had to therefore take the over expenses and add it to the total debt. rather than leaving it and trying to fund it fiscally for the specific year.
Viewers, we are going to talk a little bit more about the effect to the common man about the strategic the fiscal and monetary policies that are probably going to play out in 2021. This will be covered in the next few days as Sridharji will expand a little bit more on what is going to happen at the ground. What are going to be your interest rates, your home equity loans, how much it's going to cost you, where real estate will be headed, will stock market see new highs. We're going to give a quick look at all these things in the next couple of days as the year winds down. So let's take a quick look at Nashville. A lot of things are not Nashville, a lot of things are not adding up still. What are your thoughts? Because why was the airport closed? Why was I can ask a lot of questions here. Somehow everything seems to have been magically solved, and once the person of interest was identified, and everything seems to have like a large blanket being put on top. What are your thoughts, sir? Is there more that we need to look into in terms of what really happened in Nashville? Was it somebody that was some other country at work here? Is it really what as simple as what they are saying? Something don't add up. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think that I am moving along with your thought process in this, which is when we now look at the as we kind of sit here today, right? As we sit here today, the situation is as follows. Number one is that they have found who this person is. He seems to be a very quiet person. They find that they've talked to some of the neighbors and who say he's a very quiet, unusual type of guy. The bombing seems to have occurred pretty close. There are two types of opinions. One who thinks that the word T should not be used and it should be viewed as a random kind of an incident. That's one thing that they have indicated. The second is, but on the contrary, what you also find is that the target is the AT&T center. Now, the more information that has come out around the AT&T center is that it is a major switching AT&T switching service center where the telephone lines of Nashville and around the neighborhood, the downtown neighborhood, is taken care from there. So therefore, there is a significant impact, and to that extent, the data as well as the telephone services, according to AT&T, is being restored. So there were so many other buildings, but this building was chosen as the target, right? So that's that was seems to have been chosen, and at least one of the Republican nominees have indicated that this is the case, which is namely that the AT&T center was the target. The other thing that bothers is that how they have come to so quick conclusion, because we don't have details of what's the specific, is it a bomb? First they said it's a suicide bomber. We don't have any details around but the intensity seems to be, quite humongous, right, in terms of the velocity and the ferocity of it. Also, at that particular time, the airport was shut down. There has been wild theories flying around in social media channels, wild theories ranging from some flying missiles to maybe alien attack to anything that you can think of, wild theories. But as far as the media is concerned, investigation is concerned, they have not touched on that. So what prompted somebody? Okay, you have voice and data network services impacted, so you suspend in and out flights until that is restored. But there was a no-fly zone in operation on top of Nashville. So which brings the question, which is, what was it? Is it some kind of, satellite launched, or what is the scenario that we are talking about here? Also, 15-minute warning that was coming from that little truck, RV vehicle. What's the 15-minute? Why exactly precisely the 15-minute? Who are the people who were, firing gunshots around that point of time? So we touched on these questions. So too, because the reason is we are restating the same facts that we have stated because it is not taking us to a conclusive outcome. The questions that you're posing are very valid and right questions, and you are asking the questions, which is to say, is this investigation quarter complete, or is the investigation not revealing all types of data, which is very logical in these types of circumstances? If you take the 9/11 attack, very clear in terms of what happened. In this specific instance, it is not of magnitude, it's a very small, but yet it is in the middle of so many things that is happening in the United States right now. Conspiracy theories, involvement of foreign agencies, National Investigative Agency investigations, so many people involved, from ballot machines to forensic. The last thing that we may want to see here is the Dominion systems having some office in that AT&T center. Let's assume that gets thrown in the next couple of days. Then this thing will kick off into something even more catastrophic than what is being pursued. I'm not suggesting there is something there, but in case it turns out that there is something there, or in case something turns out that AT&T is doing some strategic work around the elections, then it begs more questions as to, what exactly it is. So more to come, Ayerji.
Yes, if someone were to try and erase some data, that would be the suspicion. The needle of suspicion would point to that direction. If it does happen, you heard it here first. Now, you also have to look at the statement of a former South Carolina Senator, Bill Bledsoe, who's suggesting that the president constitute a military tribunal to look into this whole election interference. And so these are all not lightly spoken. He's a senator of long standing, although he's not a senator currently. But so there is many people. There are many people asking questions, but they are all being asked in pockets. There is no overarching narrative that can help explain and understand what really went down on Christmas Day in Nashville. Stay tuned. There's going to be more information coming out on this. And let's go on to global politics, sir. With your permission, we can go to the next thing, which is what is happening to the state of the people who are stranded off of China's coast. I'm going to show with an image deck. We're looking at, first of all, we're going to look at Taiwan. We're looking at the Taiwan Straits, where the Chinese and Russian planes have been trespassing into the Taiwanese airspace. And I have the image up here, sir. Please go ahead.
Right. Which image you have put up?
The one on Taiwan showing close to China border. That one.
Right. Just give me. Okay. So. Right. Okay. So the Taiwan Strait. You're showing the Taiwan Strait, right? Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
So look, Taiwan Strait is the latest fulcrum point, where, if you can see the wedge between the China and Taiwan, that the Taiwan Strait is the hot potato. Down on the south, you have the South China Sea. Up on the north, you have the to the right you have Korea, and then above you have Japan. You have Japan to the right, and then above you have the Korea, right? So if you take these specific points, you find that this Taiwan Strait has become a hot potato. There is what they call as a median line. So this median line is what you call as the fine line border between China and Taiwan. Okay, though China thinks Taiwan is part of it, as part of its historical heritage. To tell especially after the 19 planes intruded and flew over, and then prior to that there was also the Chinese planes stepping in, and they said it is a routine surveillance. So a major aircraft carrier of United States passed through the Taiwan Strait about 5 days ago, right? 5 days ago. Around the same point, you found 2 days ago the big Shandong Chinese carrier passing through a specific point. So they are flexing the muzzle in that area, which prompted the Rear Admiral of United States to make a surprise visit to Taiwan and hold discussions with the Taiwanese government and the military. Why is this of importance? This is of importance for three specific reasons. We have covered this even in the RCEP and the other discussions. It's very important because even Japan has stood up and stated that Taiwan is a red line. Okay, China incursion into Taiwan is a red line. Effectively, this is another choking point. Right now, Taiwan acts as the buffer, right? So you can see that it can be a choking point, especially down as one looks at the South China Sea and up. Well, also up in the north, you have Senkaku Islands, which is a dispute between China and Japan. So it is a very hot fulcrum in terms of the strategic maneuvers that is going on. What is most compelling here is on the lines of this, you also had the Indian head of armed forces visiting the region, which we touched, but he also made a visit to South Korea to expand the military ties with South Korea. So therefore, already United States is taking care of Taiwan. Japan, to some extent, is acting as the what you call the red flag raiser. The fact that India is with Japan and India is with South Korea, and then down in the South China Sea, you can now begin to see as to why this particular strait and Taiwan has become strategic importance. Again, China is not doing something for sovereign reasons. If you read all economic reports, which we may do one program separately, Taiwan is considered in the next 25 years is far more strategic as an industrial manufacturer compared to China, because China is saturated. Taiwan is where there's massive kind of expansion, not just in Taiwan, but around the adjacent regions as well as stepping into India. Right? Taiwan is expanding big in Vietnam. Taiwan is expanding big in India, trying to expand big in India. Taiwan is establishing its semiconductor factory. So, as an economic fulcrum, it's a very important point. So, therefore, you find this particular dispute, while this election stuff is going on, has emerged. And Russia is also flexing its muscles jointly with China. They seem to be irritating the South China neighbors. Whether they see some vulnerability in the US security and foreign policy as a concession to China, we don't know. But certainly there is a flurry of activity. And India and Japan are right in the thick of it with the Taiwanese, with the Koreans, with the Vietnamese.
Now, sir, let's take a quick look
There's
at
one more
this.
map which we want to show.
Yes, I have put it up. I have put it up about Dalian and about the status of many ships, merchant ships carrying cargo that are marooned, and I won't say marooned, but they are docked waiting to land ashore, but China is not allowing them. Where do things stand on that, sir? I have the map up.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I think that I have to remember the map in my mind. Okay, so the story is that's called as the Bahai Sea. The Bahai Sea area is where, you can see like a little elliptical piece. It's a narrow funnel, and then into the Bahai Sea.
Yes.
Adjacent to that, you have Tianjin and et cetera, et cetera. So the story is that Camophene and as well as there's one more area where two Indian merchant ships are locked up for over 6 months with passengers marooned, and the China is not allowing them to come in, or crew being replaced, and they're only ensuring that the medical supplies and other stuff go. It's not just the Indian ships, but there's also the Korean ships, the Australian ships. So the coal is stuck there, plus all other merchandise especially from Australia and other places, which passes through that port, is stuck in the around the Bahai Sea region. There's a whole bunch of vessels which has nowhere to go, right? So the story is, and then if you look at that Bahai Sea and then the adjacent, it is connecting to Beijing also, right? So it's a strategic point to the Beijing. It's also a major kind of a merchant trading. Besides Shanghai and Shenzhen ports, which is up further north, you have this Dalian region, a major kind of trading point. So what you're witnessing in that area is that it's not only South China Sea, but this area is called as the East China Sea. So East China Sea is also having this trade fulcrum and trade contest, and there is no other mechanism other than air for people to come in case there is a conflict, to rescue some of these people of various nationalities, from Vietnamese to Filipinos to Indians to Westerners who are in these MV ships locked up in this specific region. So you can see now how this integrated architecture and integrated maritime strategy is playing out. What started in South China Sea is now extending into Taiwan Strait and into East China Sea, right? So I think that's the purpose of that specific discussion. People would be, I don't know how many people, I don't know whether India covers it very widely, but certainly in the Western world, the gridlock of Australia and the gridlock of the two Indian ships, which is stranded there for more than 6 months, is certainly getting a lot of media attention and strategic kind of importance in this little war that is going on between the China, Russia, and the major powers, Indo-Pacific powers, or Quad.
And let's take a look at the next map, which is that of West Asia. The Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar has made yet another trip to Qatar. And this assumes significance because of the fact that there have been so many trips and a lot of activity is happening. India is trying to perhaps take a more dominant role in terms of being able to take custody, for example, of Mecca and Medina masjids, which Pakistan has been doing traditionally. In fact, the Pakistani TV channels have been going hyperventilating on this eventuality, should that happen, because then whatever little significance role that Pakistani army played in Saudi Arabia will be diminished even more. So what do you see in this trip of Sri Jaishankar to West Asia, sir?
If we take a look at that West Asia map, which is the mainland being Saudi Arabia, and then come into the Persian Gulf, right? You find UAE, you have Kuwait, you have Oman, you have on the other side you have Bahrain. So it is a hot kind of potato. That Persian Gulf segment channel, or Persian Gulf channel, again is a major ferry point of ports and trade. But it is also, if you look at Qatar, which is also groomed up there. So Qatar is another strategic venue. Besides Saudi Arabia is a strategic venue. Why you have an American fleet permanently stationed in Bahrain, facing the Saudi Arabia in terms of the oil wells. All the oil wells are located, facing the Bahrain side of the border, Bahrain side of the boundary, the other side of the water. So the importance that it attaches, which Mr. Jaishankar, Minister for External Affairs, this is the 9th visit by a dignitary. It is almost all of those states have been visited, and he has made it very candid and very clear, which is to say the discussion is around three things: investments, security, and trade. Because these nations, which were once upon a time reliant on their positive balances in their reserves, which they meaningfully deployed and generating attractive returns, which allowed them to subsidize locally the oil prices, may not be able to. They may not be able to afford. So that's number one. Number two is that Saudi has stated it is looking beyond energy as a vehicle for it to, so they want to develop Saudi as a major tourist kind of attraction, tourist and trade attraction. So therefore, they're looking at alternate mechanisms or alternate ways of, so security is very important to them, as well as countries which are very not hostile, which are development focused, or their focus. At least UAE is one of the largest bilateral trading partners of India, both within the context of investments as well as trade. If I'm right, UAE is in the top five, in as a bilateral kind of a trading partner, is a significant investor. In India, it's also along with Singapore. Singapore is the number one, I think, if I'm right. Singapore is number one, and United States is number two, or United States is in one of the top five. So you have this West Asia region, which is of very significant importance. The other thing is, West Asia is also important because a large number of Indians are employed in West Asia. And many of the states are reliant on remittances from West Asia as a source of their GDP. One of the countries which got significantly impacted because of the roll down in the employment is Bangladesh. A lot of people had to leave the UAE region as they began to what I call as deleverage the employment from overseas. Indians still are a good chunk of the population. They're also business people who have invested significant around all of those GCC countries, Gulf Cooperation Council countries. So West Asia, therefore, is significant. So which is why the India is looking at that as a significant. We have already touched on the energy part. We talked about it yesterday, I think. So therefore, when you look at that, all the maps that we are presenting, you are seeing that the next battle is around the control of trade, security, and energy. And whosoever controls this maritime gateways, they're going to control the effective flow and geopolitical decisions of the world.
And lastly, a look at the markets. Goldman Sachs is predicting a 5% growth next year, whereas the United States is more modest. They are predicting a 4% growth. What are your thoughts on? And after that, we can sign off on this episode.
Great. The situation with United States is, with this $600, Goldman Sachs has recalculated that the stimulus is coming in rather than the impact moving to quarter three. They believe that you will see positive buoyancy even in Q2. So they have repriced the growth in Q2 and Q1, average between 2 to 3%. So they believe that even without the $2,000, the recalculated GDP numbers is 5%, which we have not achieved for quite some time. We crossed 4%. 4.2 was the projected by the Fed for 2021. So they are forecasting a 5% growth based on all this cash that is going in to going into the economy. Now you add, if it becomes $2,000 and more into the small business, so you have two other variables, which is unemployment and cash in circulation in the economy. Fed has projected the unemployment next year to be 5%, right? So, which is a record number. We went up to about 14.9% in the peak of the pandemic. We quickly came down to about 6.7%. And next we go to 5%. Then that means that there's more people at work, whether remote or otherwise. There's more cash in the economy. That means they're saying, based on the trends that they have seen in Q2 and Q3, we have not shared this chart, but we will, as Sree Iyer said, that I know everybody, you have either a Trump believer or you're a Trump hater. There's only two. There's nothing in between. There's no objective or subjective. I like Trump or I hate Trump. Trump's policies has seen the fastest recovery in any type of such pandemic or asset bubble in 1 year. Within 6 months, unemployment went from 14.9% to about 7% to 6.7%. The retail sales, which dipped dramatically in the Q1, Q2, went back to normalcy. We can show by charts in by Q4, Q3, end of Q3. So in 2 quarters, we saw the uptick, and we can demonstrate both in the internet crisis as well as in the crisis that we had in the global financial crisis, the tapering of the stimulus over a period of 3 years delayed the recovery, and hence restoration to normalcy took a lot of time. Whereas here, this huge injection of stimulus targeted with a volume at one significant step, the 2.1 trillion I'm referring to in March, April, gave the impetus for the economy to recover. Okay. Now, if you are looking purely as a financial markets economist, you really have to admire the effort that was put in and the tweaking that occurred. Look at some of these retail stocks in the market and the retail sales. It's quite amazing as to what the performance of these digital companies are within, during this period of fast recovery or fast evolution to normalcy. Now we are projecting a 5% growth, and we are talking about pandemic and balance sheet when we started this conversation. We'll do a separate discussion, but I may be called, I am the next Trump or junior Trump, but I only going by numbers. You see the numbers? Then we can debate the story. Around the same period in the previous kind of the two administrations or the two major crises. So it's a very positive. This year we will finish with about 15.6, 15.7% growth in S&P. It's not the 29% that we saw in 2019, but this is a pandemic year. Let's keep that in mind. And then we saw 5.6 to 5.9% growth in Dow Jones and some astronomical 47% growth in NASDAQ, which is the home of all the tech as well as the consumer discretionary. So we expect, again, between 6 to 9% growth in the stocks in 2021, driven by this cash that is coming into the economy. That's why I say it's a finely architected balance sheet, which is putting money into the hands of the people who pay taxes. Remember, put money into the people of the hands who pay taxes, who work, because they will go back and with confidence, they will go and spend, recognizing that jobs are intact as well as they have disposable money to kind of spend. I think that's the thematic that this economic model of Trump and Mnuchin is demonstrating. And also, we should not forget Larry Kudlow. Larry as well has been instrumental in some of these things. So this is my kind of overarching summary. I know I've taken a lot of time to give an explanation, but this is a very passionate topic, so I've taken more time than what is required.
Just to add to what you just said, sir, that there is another round of PPP, Payment Protection Plan, that is going to be put in place. And many of the companies that availed of the first round are also eligible as long as they can show that in the past few months, they have suffered at least a loss of 25% of their business from the previous year. That is your yardstick. If you get that, then you are eligible, and that hopefully will keep the the boat sailing afloat. And it is hoped that this V-shaped recovery will continue. Sridharji, it was wonderful talking to you today, and this has been a most revealing session because we have covered the whole gamut of topics, and we'll be back again tomorrow, same time, same place. Thanks for joining us. Do not forget to subscribe to PGurus channel. Namaskar.
Namaskar, and thank you so much.